Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this regularly scheduled joint meeting of the Power Authority and Canals Corporation. I'm John Colmel, Chairman of the Authority, coming to you live via video conference from Buffalo, New York, day one of phase one of the reopening here in Western New York. So an exciting time for us, as it is for many across the state, as we begin to claw our way back up the hill of opportunity across our great state. With us this morning, I have my fellow trustees, Judge Nicanji, Mike Balboni, Dennis Trainer. Trustees McKibben and Vicente have been excused. Also with us, as always, Gil Quinones and his outstanding team. As already indicated, this meeting was scheduled and has always been duly noticed by our open meetings law, and hence I call the meeting to order. The agenda and relevant materials have been circulated to all of us in advance, and unless there's any suggestions or comments regarding the agenda as proposed, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I heard a motion and a second in there. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. As we customarily do, we'll start this meeting in executive session. Plus or minus an hour is our anticipation, and therefore I ask for a motion to conduct an executive session to discuss our financial and credit history or other matters regarding public safety and security pursuant to Section 105 of the Public Officers Law.
So moved.
I think, thanks, Dennis. I heard a second in there as well. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will adjourn to executive session and be back with all of you in a bit. Thank you. We are back. If I could have a motion to formally resume the meeting in open session, please.
So moved. So moved. Second.
I heard a motion and a second in there. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And as always, affirm that no votes were taken during our executive session. Next up, our contractors list. I think we've all responded in advance of this session relative to any potential conflicts. Unless there's any updates to that at this time, I'm pleased to turn the virtual podium over to our CEO, Gil Quinones. When we were last together in public session almost 2 months ago, it was on the front end of this crisis. As we're navigating our way through it, Gil, we look forward to your update on our results to date, and obviously as we now look ahead to reopening across the state, our thoughts and plans as to how to get back on the horse and continue the race. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, board members and staff and the public who will be watching this board meeting video conference. Next slide, please. Mr. Chairman, as you had mentioned, we are kind of on the middle going into reopening mode statewide. I am pleased to report that since really the beginning of this pandemic that we have successfully protected the health and safety of our employees, our partners, contractors and vendors and communities, especially where we operate across the state. If you recall, we established a COVID-19 task force in January of 2020. We were early into this we have employees in Asia and Europe who do quality control and factory acceptance testing of large equipment that we purchase, and they have reported about COVID early on in the process. We did refresh our pandemic and business continuity plans in February of 2020 and formally stood up our Emergency Operations Center using the Incident Command System process on March 2nd, 2020. We also successfully instituted work from home across NYPA. Within 5 days, we were able to convert from our normal way of working to a work from home status, and credit to IT group for making that happen. Out the crisis, we were able to sustain the operation of our generation and transmission systems statewide. As you know, we produce up to 25% of electricity here in our state, and we own a third transmission system. We are a critical lifeline infrastructure of our power system in our state, and I am proud to say that we were able to fulfill that role during this crisis. We also sequestered around 83, 85 of our operators 4 weeks at a time since March. These are our control room power plant operators and control center, transmission control center operators. They are akin to pilots or air traffic control that are critical to our operations, and we made sure that they are protected and isolated from any potential infection. As a leader in New York State, we also took it upon ourselves to convene and coordinate the response of all power plant owners in our state. We executed a mutual assistance agreement with all of them, including Canada, Ontario Power Generation, and Hydro-Quebec, to make sure power plants in New York can share resources, including key personnel, if needed. We've also been conducting weekly, now bi-weekly calls with all of the investor-owned utilities and the Long Island Power Authority in New York to make sure that we're also coordinating the response of our transmission and distribution utilities. To fortify the flexibility and liquidity of NYPA, we paused all capital and operating work. Of course, also to make sure that we ensure the safety of our employees. But in times of uncertainty, we decided shelter place, for lack of a better term, for our company, and make sure that we can withstand the storm, and we did that very well. In fact, because we are a very strong and stable utility with good credit, we successfully issued $1.2 billion in long-term bonds in April. $800 million of that have been classified as green bonds, which are going to be used in green infrastructure and to meet the climate goals of our state. So we're very happy that we are flexible. We have enough liquidity to be able to deal with any other shocks, that second wave that will come, flare-ups that will come to our utility, while being able to continue our and critical capital program going forward. So overall, what I would say, if this is a war and we are in this fog of war, I am pleased to report that the first battle, NYPA and canals, have performed extremely well. We've learned a lot. We've learned that we can actually stay productive by from home. we have learned that maybe going forward, that our workplace and our work processes will be different than one that had back, say, on February 1st. So there are things that are working now that we can carry forward into the new normal. We also need to look at our existing organizational structure and process, because we want to make sure that when we go to a mode, a work from home mode, that we can all be as productive as we can in advancing our strategic initiatives. So overall, the game plan that we put forth, embodied in our pandemic plan, embodied in our business continuity plans, worked extremely well. Our IT system worked well. Our employees just stepped up, all hands on deck, and really, I would say, overperform in making sure that we are fulfilling our mission for the state of New York. So what we are now shifting to is to prepare for those flare-ups and following waves of this pandemic, especially in the fall and winter, which will be coincident with the flu season. And we are taking all the lessons learned and doing all the preparations so that we can even be better prepared to withstand those flare-ups and second waves. Today, you will hear from two of our leaders here at NYPA. First will be Ricardo da Silva. Now, looking forward, when I say forward, really over the next 3 months, right? We're still in the fog of war. There's still a lot of lack of visibility over there, and we need to kind of take this one step at a time. But today you'll hear from Ricardo da Silva, who will talk about our responsible return to work program. Evan Yeager, our finance, who will talk about the unpausing of our major capital and O&M work that we paused at the beginning of this pandemic. And Dave Mellon, the head of our operations in Canal, who will briefly discuss our plans to regionally open the Canal stages. So let me stop there and open it up for question before I transfer it to Ricardo.
Well, first and foremost, and while we've had a running dialogue on and offline as a board, kudos to you and the team, 8-9 weeks, whatever it is, later, for having navigated the unprecedented situation. No matter how much you've drilled and prepared, it's always difficult, if not possible, to be fully anticipate a reality that's this severe and complex. So kudos to you and the team for just a great outcome, albeit very much still a work in process, but a great start in navigating the initial battle of, as you said, the war of relative to COVID-19. Questions from others, Judge, Mike, Dennis, in terms of what Gil's just recapped?
Kudos, great management, seriously, particularly since there's no real book on how to do this. Keeping everybody safe, very, very important. It'll stand us in great stead as we begin to eventually come into the reopening of this.
I think the performance has been outstanding. The employees have stepped up, and it's very much appreciated.
Couldn't agree more. It's been a great job by everybody. Yeah, great job by all.
Yep, and the entire organization should be very proud. Again, distinguished and differentiated, not only across the state, but across the industry for how well you perform under duress and extreme stress. So very, very well done. And I'm confident we're all the better prepared for the inevitable flare-ups. As you said, Gil, it's not a question of if, it's merely a question of when the next wave comes and how significant. it is, whether it's high tide or low tide, when that wave rolls in. So I'm confident the lessons learned, as you've said, will be instantly applied and will be even better prepared. So with that, pass the virtual podium back to you and Ricardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. Before I transfer it to Ricardo, I also just want to acknowledge our partners in our union, IBEW, UWA, our unions at Canals, both the CSEA and PEF. They've been partners every step of the way in this response, and we could not have done it without their partnership. Also, I wanted to just acknowledge, I mentioned to you about our IT system work really well, not just from a functionality perspective, but coming from an office situation to a completely distributed within 5 days, needed cybersecurity assurances and protocols, especially for a lifeline sector like us, electricity sector. And I just want to acknowledge our IT group and our cybersecurity team for making sure that we keep our systems as safe as possible. Now, let's go through let's say the next 3 months, what you should expect from NYPA and Canals over the next 3 months. And I will first transfer it to Ricardo da Silva, who will talk about our responsible return to the workplace. Ricardo. Ricardo, you might be muted. Make sure you unmute.
He's yet to return to the workplace.
Stand by.
Hello, Ricardo.
Let me just, Daniela, can you just please double check?
Yeah. Yes, I'm pinging them right now. Stand by.
While we're waiting for Ricardo, Gil, again, just reflecting in the rearview mirror for a little bit. No real significant surprises then. The preparation and the planning and all the rest of that was, it sounds very comprehensive. That's outstanding.
Absolutely. Our incident command structure really worked very well, led by Paul Tartaglia, Adrian Lotto, and overseen by Saul Rojas. I thought that worked really well. Again, the IT and the cyber team worked really well. The discoveries that we actually had and surprises were more related to positive surprises. We didn't realize how productive we could be even in a work from home setup. Those who are not where their jobs are not apt for working from home, we tried to assign them to support our state's emergency response efforts. So our, the Department of Homeland Security, Emergency Services, Department of Labor, in helping them process New Yorkers filing for unemployment claims. And now we're enrolling them to do contact tracing. So we're trying to keep everybody as productive as we can, even at this stage now where we're starting to return to the workplace.
Have we caught up with Ricardo?
Yeah, Joe has reached out to him because he can hear us. We're not hearing him, so Joe is on the phone with him.
Do we want to jump ahead to Evan?
Yeah.
Or do these have to go in sequence?
Yeah, Evan, can you unmute? Let's see if we can hear you.
How are we doing?
Okay.
Okay,
so,
great.
Maybe Evan can pick it up.
Yeah, Evan, why don't we start with you and then we'll come back to Ricardo.
So-
Can somebody please advance the slide to Evans?
Yeah. Sega, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Yes, right there. Go back.
One more.
Yes, right there. Slide 12. Yep.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so good morning, all. Yeah, my name is Evan Yeager, and I'm a member of the of NYPA's Incident Command Response Team, and specifically representing Finance Section, as Gil mentioned. So similar to what Rick was going to describe in the company's efforts to bring people back to the workplace, similar efforts are underway to restart NYPA's capital and O&M work portfolios. I guess before discussing the efforts we're taking to restart the work, just first a brief summary of the work that was halted at the onset of COVID-19. So we immediately conducted a review and paused most of the organization's 1,200 capital and O&M projects that were going on across all business units. So the work was bucketed into one of three categories that ensured the safety of NYPA's internal workforce and all engaged contractors by focusing on critical work, but also this helped preserve NYPA's liquidity, as this was prior to any completed bond offerings. So work categorized as continue meant that while construction was still halted, external engagements, either through major procurements, external design efforts, etc., were still allowed to continue. So this helped us keep some level of momentum on our major efforts underway. Work was also categorized as Q4 restart, as this aligned well with the expected 3 to 6 month pause period. So this work was expected to resume using internal resources but limit external spending. So this was our opportunity to maintain a reasonable level of productivity across the workforce, as most folks were working remotely. And lastly, some work was ultimately deferred, as we recognized that with so many unknowns with the upcoming pause period, the organization would need to focus on more priority efforts. As this work categorization was done, we did identify a handful of absolutely critical projects that needed to continue live construction. Examples being work that was mid-outage and had resulted in reduced system redundancy. So for these, we worked with legal to interpret the Executive Order 202, essential versus non-essential determinations, also ensured alignment with other agencies, and continued minimal construction efforts with many employee safeguards in place. So all of this resulted in a significantly reduced revised portfolio budget through the end of the year that dramatically cut back on the amount of cash that was planned to go out the door. All right, so shifting back to where we are today, our focus is now to restart NYPA's work portfolio in a methodical process that balances those business critical efforts with strategic initiatives so we don't lose sight of either. We're also measuring each project against a basic set of prioritization criteria to help us understand what work should be brought back first. So our priority projects are always those focused on the safety and security of our facilities and employees, but also critical are those projects regulated either internally or through an external agency, but mandated in one form or another. Our customers' perspective of work still remains critical. As well, it may not be critical for us internally. It is critical for them to keep it going, as some of them are operating in critical facilities. It's also important that the work is COVID adaptable, so meaning that the projects allow for workers to function in a safe manner, spread out from one another, working split shifts, etc. And lastly, we all recognize that NYPA has many in-flight major contracts in place, so working to get these projects up and running helps NYPA, but also helps contractors out there hoping to get their folks back to work. So the resulting plan from this is batches of projects to be restarted that are prioritized, but also in alignment with New York's unpause plan. So note now, I think 5 of the regions are officially unpaused, but I did hear yesterday that Western New York opened up as well and has hit the 7 of 7 criteria. So as such, these batches of recommended restart projects match accordingly. So the first set came from CEC, our St. Lawrence and our BG facilities, and the next coming from Niagara. So note also that both commercial operations and canals work within these regions are also being identified and following similar restart schedules. Our first area of focus on these projects originally categorized as continue, but we've already started to assess the Q4 restart projects also to understand if some of that makes sense to pull in. So even beyond the prioritization effort that identifies the work that should move forward first, all the project teams are also utilizing a formalized return to work checklist to ensure that all areas of the company are ready to restart. Next slide, please. Thank you. So 3 separate checklist processes have been established to facilitate this process. All are electronic, they're auditable, and they capture input from various perspectives across NYPA. The goal is really that these restart decisions being made are company-wide and cover all facets of the project work. So the first is designed for contractor projects. This is the majority of work done at NYPA, but this is work that includes work from external contractors. The second is focused on internal projects, those efforts utilizing only NYPA's own internal workforce. And the last is for third-party permitted work. This is work that's ongoing on NYPA's land or at their facilities that do not involve NYPA employees. But each checklist does route around the business and captures specifically financial confirmation, so ensuring that the work is included in our revised forecasts, legal confirmation that the work can move ahead and not conflict with any of the New York State directives, public or government relations or corporate communications to ensure that all stakeholders, internally, externally, have been engaged and are ready for this work to start also. And an EH&S review of the project to make sure that revised health and safety plans have been received and agreed upon, just to be sure that they're operating in a COVID-specific environment and all employees on site recognize that. SSMR procurement has a big piece in this as well, obviously, and they're re-engaging contractors. And lastly, NYPA's own leadership, just to ensure we're all in alignment. So with the state continuing to open up in various aspects and employees returning to the field, we do expect additional project work to restart accordingly. Our goal here is to just control this restart, keep everyone safe, and continue working to hit the objectives we had set out. So with that, thank you for your time. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Evan. Whether it's you, Joe, Gil, what's your sense, best case, ability to restart across much of the state now? On a best case scenario, will we be substantially back on track by the end of the year? How much has been lost? Are we going to be able to recoup some portion of the 2 months that are lost, or in best that we can only recover with incremental time going forward? What's the net impact of this, you think, come year end?
Sure, I can take that. So, of all the work we looked at, so the capital and O&M portfolio across NYPA was about $1.1 billion. I did put in my other slide that we did drop about 420 to 450 million of that. So our new base, that's basically our new baseline. We're operating around the $650 million number.
Okay.
The goal moving forward, obviously there's a lot of factors to consider. We're unsure what this is all going to look like. I do think we can recover some of that, assuming all goes well, and we wouldn't see such a dramatic figure, such a dramatic downturn. We did do a good job keeping quite a bit of work in motion while people were remote, which was great to see. And we did have a lot of work going on at contractor sites in manufacturing facilities and things like that to keep a lot of these major objectives moving along. So we do hope to improve from that number, but we also are focusing on capital, right, and keeping an eye on O&M just to make sure that the company's finances are in good shape, obviously, throughout the rest of the year. So it's a balancing act, but if we're going at this rate, it should improve.
And the flip side of that, and maybe it's an impossible answer. What's your collective sense of our preparation to navigate through the next wave? Obviously, it's contingent on the size and severity and the like, but will we be able to, quote unquote, stay in business and stay after it, you think? Are we better prepared to do that with the mitigating efforts and other preparations that we're now taking, or is the potential for another meaningful pause just as real as it was before?
That is a difficult question to answer.
And I get it.
I guess, I mean, what I can say from a project perspective, I think we did a good job pausing the first time around. And that was with, limited foresight into what this would end up looking like. I'd hope to say that if we were to face a similar situation, we would be quicker and we would easily adapt into a second wave of this. Just keep in mind when folks are coming back into the field now, they're already operating under a different environment. Maintaining social distancing, masks, different PPE. So this is on everybody's mind currently.
And I'm assuming there has to be some inherent inefficiency in that. My ability to operate with a mask 6 feet apart versus working adjacent, to my coworker or whatever. There's some inherent inefficiency, or we're going to have to learn how to be efficient under new work rules and new work orders. Correct?
Absolutely. This is Gil. Absolutely. And we have designed our return to work, and now I mentioned before, preparing for flare-ups and second waves, so that it's like a dimmer switch of a light where we can ramp up if we can control, there are no infections, we'll ramp up. If there are flare-ups especially within our specific projects, then we have to dim down. The good thing is that we're practicing maximum hygiene, social distancing, mask, even wear of face shields if and when necessary. We've also been successful, I believe, in educating our employees on how to protect themselves at home and in their communities, where most of the infections are happening now. Over 60% of the infections are happening at home in the communities. So we should be better prepared, balanced out by what you just said, Mr. Chairman, about lost productivity with all the gear that we have to wear and social distancing. So it may be a push.
Okay. Judge Mike Dennis, other questions for Evan?
I'm fine.
All right. Ricardo?
Good report.
Did we find Ricardo?
Yes, Ricardo
I'm
is.
here, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Ricardo was lost and now he's found. All right.
All right.
Slide
Great.
5.
Great. Apologies
Tagar.
for that.
No problem. As long as you're returning to the workplace, that's what we want to know.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So, my name is Ricardo Silva. I've been a member of the ICS team under planning and implementation supporting NYPA's COVID-19 response. More recently, we've been focusing on a responsible return to the workplace set of activities, keeping in mind several key pillars that have guided our thinking. First and foremost, as Gil stated, the health and safety of our employees and those we serve is number one. Every action and task planned is with that in mind. The approach that we have mapped out is aligned with Governor Cuomo's guidance in New York Forward with a regional pause. Once those metrics have been met, essential work drives the pace of reentry for our employees. Based on the work, site-specific plans have been developed to ensure that we return essential employees in a measured approach. By doing so, we are actively managing density and promoting social distancing across our operating facilities and administrative locations. Based on the 5 vulnerable regions that unpause according to Governor Cuomo's guidance, our first phase of returning to the workplace commenced yesterday. In addition, over the weekend, we ended sequestration of personnel at the upstate operating facilities. To prepare the workforce, communications and resources have been developed internally and made available to employees to provide consistent, transparent information about what to expect. Next slide. We're working together to reopen the workplace to achieve the business needs of the organization while ensuring the safety and well-being of the workforce. Our actions have been deliberate across 4 categories. First, reentry considerations. Employees will be brought back in stages. Those employees that can continue to be productive working remotely are being urged to continue to do so. And our assessment indicates that approximately 45% of the workforce is able to remain productive while working remotely on a full-time basis. Secondly, preparing the workforce. We will continue to support those employees who can continue to work remotely. For those that are returning to the workplace, we have established new and updated policies, as well as drafted a set of guidelines for employees to follow. These guidelines have been issued to communicate best practices, as well as information to employees during their transition to the workplace. And much like any safety practice, we are looking to institute a culture of shared social responsibility. Third, we're preparing the workplace. A series of actions to ready the workplace are being carried out. These include providing PPE, performing more frequent cleaning, posting of informational signs, and analyzing areas of potential density. And fourth, we're implementing and we're monitoring. We're taking a project management style to implementation and monitoring of these actions. We continue to be vigilant towards any additional or updated New York State and CDC guidance to ensure compliance with health and safety guidelines and requirements. And furthermore, we're leveraging new tools and data analysis to monitor the metrics across New York State and our employees through daily health screenings. Next slide. A thorough assessment by executive leadership was performed to understand and prioritize the functional roles that would return to the workplace in the near term. It was deemed that of the combined NYPA and New York State Canal Corporation, approximately 28% are required to return to the workplace on a full-time basis to support the work. Another 28% may require some level of return to the workplace, but it would be on a part-time basis. The remaining employee base, the 45% or so, will continue working remotely. Next slide. Site-specific plans have been developed for each of our operating facilities. In this graph, as an example, week 0 coincides with the moment a regional unpause occurs. From there, employees will begin returning to the workplace, initially to address any preparations. Once that's done, the numbers will continue to increase in a phased approach according to work priorities and schedules. We are looking to maximize social distancing by segmenting work across locations and schedules. Next slide. Similarly, we ran scenarios at the New York State Canal Corporation under different assumptions of remaining closed or reopening. Doing so provides additional insights into planning for how employees will return to support essential functions, as well as regional reopening that David Mellon will speak to. Next slide. For administrative offices, many of the employees represented in these graphs are support functions, such as engineering and project management resources. Primarily, these roles will have more flexible work schedules and only require being in the office on a part-time basis. You'll see that the percentages of individuals returning to the workplace are quite low. An evaluation of the floor plans to understand the density has been performed, and we're also in the midst of developing software applications to facilitate scheduling of these personnel coming in and monitoring floor occupancy. Next slide. So with that, I want to thank you again for providing me the opportunity to share NYPA's responsible return to the workplace strategy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. I find the 44% intriguing in terms of just less than half of our workforce can continue to effectively work from home. What are our thoughts of making that an ongoing reality versus phasing that back in over time? Or how have you thought about that? As I listened to the Googles and others, talk about keeping their teams offline for a much more extended period of time. How have we thought about that?
Yeah,
That's a great.
Yeah, it's Gil. It's a great question. As I've said before, there are a lot of good things that we discovered, amidst this crisis. One is that it's actually possible to have some of our employees work from home and continue to be productive. We are going forward looking to evolve into the new normal, taking into account all the things that we're learning along the way. A couple of things are going on that you should know about. One, Christine Pizzo, who's the head of our HR and shared services, has already started to work with the executive leadership team. Have to start thinking about what the new workplace will look like, and what the required processes and organizational design. So we have launched that about a week ago, and Piasek, along with Daniela, who's heading our DTO, Rob, our head of IT and information, also about, in partnership with Christine, okay, in workplace, what's the technology platforms and applications and infrastructure that we need to keep our employees productive? I don't know whether that 45 number is eventually the end of this, right? Because we do have employees within that group who are who their nature of work is not apt for working from home, but they are working from home nonetheless because of the crisis, and we're keeping them productive by supporting other state agencies like Department of Labor, be contact tracers, and Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. But there will be three groupings of employees, I am convinced, in the future. One group will be employees who need to go to the sites and to our offices to work 5 days a week. There are going to be employees that are part-time. They can work from home, and they can come into the office 1, 2, 3 days a week. And then we have employees who can be productive working from home and will only occasionally go to our offices and sites. So that directionally, I believe, is where we're headed.
What have you seen to date, Gil, in terms of what I'll call the cultural stress that it creates? And I don't mean that in a negative or pejorative way. The cultural dynamic, it clearly shifts for any organization when everyone's not in one place, and the ease of interaction. How have you and your team been navigating that, or anything of note in terms of the challenges of dealing with that and ensuring the collective engagement? It's over the recent years, the organization's had a tremendous increase in employee engagement, and obviously we don't want to backtrack on that, and that's one of the core strengths of NYPA. How have you guys talked about that? What have you seen to date? What are you thinking going forward?
Touch on it a little bit, and if Christine is on this, I don't see her on the tile, but I think she's connected. I'll pass it on to her so she can amplify also. Well, there are two layers in this from my perspective. One is just the general anxiety crisis on all of us, right? So, and the impact of just being cooped up and not being able to see our friends and loved ones because of stay in place, stay at home mandates, and just the need to social distance, etc. So that we're already seeing a not just at NYPA, but a general impact to the citizens of our state, stress that provides. Shifting into the NYPA world, I agree with you. I think it remains to be seen. We know we can be productive working from home, but what is the impact to our level of engagement and teamwork, etc.? I think that is yet to be whether it could be mitigated by certain actions that we need to figure out later on from organizational design processes, performance management, all the HR related issues. But I think, Mr. Chairman, it's still to be determined. I do want to commend our team, especially led by our HR group, for over communicating with our employees, for giving the appropriate guidance, all the resources that are available to help deal with this crisis. Christine, are you online to just give some of those services that you and your team have been providing to NYPA and Canal workforce?
Absolutely, and I think you summarized it well. I'll start off talking about engagement. That was something from the very beginning. We focused on programmatically looking at the organization as a whole, and then targeting special needs of our employees across the sites. In terms of engagement, we have online trainings that we're doing to support people and their families at home. We have record attendance. We had about 200 people per session, and they're well attended, and we're doing those frequently. We have resource guides for the staff that are sequestered, for them and their families, to support them during this time. We've revised our policies. We've expanded and modified them in terms of benefits, time, attendance, working in that way to support people while they're home. We've had a lot of change management. I commend that team for creating return to work guides, working from remotely guides, communicating that out to people, doing talking points for managers, having a website. We're leveraging our online platform for Mosaic. It's called Jam, but it's like a social media, internal social media for NYPA, where people can chat back and forth and talk about how they're working from home, what they need, what's working, what's not working, and it creates a really dynamic way for people to interact like we've never interacted before. We performed a lessons learned exercise where we went out to people and said, what works when you're at home, what doesn't, how are you managing your workload? So then from that we create tips on how to work effectively. And then also for the staff that are at home that aren't at full capacity just by the nature of their work, we're right now performing a workload project where we're having everyone sort of write down their processes, what they're working on, their skills, present skills and past skills, so that we can share resources across the organization. So if you need, someone who's an expert in Excel, you can sort of reach into that bucket and find people that have capacity to help you with the things that you're working on, so that we're taking making full use of this time at home. And as Gil said, in terms of the workforce planning project, that is underway, and that's where we're looking at the NYPA of the future through this lens. So I think this is perfect timing for a lot of our projects, and we've had great success thus far. I know that on meetings with my teams, and I know that all of EMC is having all hands meetings. I have them weekly. A lot of us have them weekly, and I think that the level of interaction, even on Teams, where we see everyone's faces. We never had that opportunity before to see everyone's face every week on a call. So I think it has changed. This has changed us for the better in that way.
Terrific. Yeah, that's wonderful. Very impressive in terms of the kinds of things you're doing. So kudos. I agree. is changing, the workplace dynamic and creating that new normal that will continue to evolve. And as I said, the collective engagement, literal and figurative, that the organization's had has made us ever stronger. And I'm thrilled and pleased to hear the continuing focus to ensure we build on that and not run the risk of backsliding. So very well done. Great. Anyone else? Judge, Mike, Dennis, questions for, Ricardo or Gil or Christine or anyone? Otherwise, we'll move on to canals.
Dave Mellon will be presenting our regional reopening of the New York State canals. Dave?
The boaters have been chasing me, so I'm glad, that our ship's coming in, so that's great. Or the ships are going out, whatever the right phrase, relevant phrase would be here. So, Dave.
Okay. Yes. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. Chairman, board members, other attendees. I'm going to give you an overview of the reopening plan for canals. It's a one-slide presentation. The slide is kind of a placeholder that just is simply the top part of a notice to mariners that we sent out last Friday, kind of laying out to the public our plan at that time. If we could just go back to, mid-March when all this started and talk a little bit about, the somewhat sudden suspension of work across the canal system and what is it that has to be restarted to get the system open. There's well over 20 some significant projects across the state. We had, for example, 8 lock rehabilitation projects being performed by our maintenance crews. We had over 15 construction projects by contractors that were active at that time. We've got over 50 locks across the system, and not all of them, but many of them are in a varied state of disrepair. This was mid-March, and all the troops and the contractors at that time were looking ahead, thinking, the typical opening isn't until mid-May, so there was a good 6 to 8 weeks of work time available. Additionally, a lot of the vessels that we have, work vessels that we have, are in various states of disrepair. That repair work was stopped in mid-March. So that's kind of the package of work that needs to be restarted and accomplished before we can open the system. So over the past few weeks, we've developed a reopening plan. There's 5 concepts associated with the plan that I think are worth sharing. They're framework concepts. One of them is that the reopening is in full alignment with the governor's New York Forward Plan. So as the various regions open, the crews, the canal maintenance crews and contractors in those economic regions go back to work. Last Friday, the notice to mariners that you see on the screen there, 3 of the 5 economic regions that comprise the canal system were open: Finger Lakes, Central New York, and Mohawk Valley. Now today, the Western is open, and it seems as though the Capital District is imminent. So we by today or maybe later in the week, we could very well have a situation where all the affected regions that cover the canal system are open. The second thing, and this is probably the most important part of the plan, is that the plan overall is conservative relative to employee safety. It's the number one priority. All relevant COVID protocols will be followed. We anticipate something on the order of a 5 to 10% productivity loss due to the need to follow COVID-19 safety protocols. Particularly at the locks, I envision canal workers, having to wear goggles, masks, and gloves. So we're going to be, and this is, it's uncharted territory. We haven't done this before. So in general, we're proceeding cautiously with employee safety, at the front of our minds. So we're going to see how this goes and how it helps. And there may be some things that we're not seeing right now that we'll have to adjust to as we get this work underway. Another concept is the workers themselves. You've heard a lot today about the gradual return to work of employees. To get the canal season open this year, it requires all the employees to come back 100%. We're planning to start that process next week Additionally, the Canal Corporation will have to hire 50 to 60 seasonal workers to assist us in completing the work, and another 120 seasonal workers to operate the system once it's ready. So it's a quick ramp up, and that's going back to what I said before about being cautious. There's a lot of people. We have 375 maintenance employees, and when you add on the seasonals, there's just a lot of people to manage, and there's some risk relative to safety. Another concept that's associated with the reopening plan is the concept of a staggered opening. So the system, it's a vast system. It expands across the state, obviously. And the concept is that we are going to work diligently, work responsibly, get the system open, and when we can give parts of it to the public, we will. So we won't hold everything until everything's ready and then open it. We will be looking at this on a regional basis, and when parts of the system are available, we will communicate that to the public. Much of the system will be available to the public by July 4th. Some parts will not be available, and as I'll briefly walk you through walk you across the state in terms of the opening plan, but there are 7 critical projects that are the projects that will result in some parts of the system not being open by July 4th. And the last part of the framework of the plan is a commitment to good communication with our stakeholders. There are a lot of regional assets in the canal system available right now. They've been available throughout the non-navigation season. Our trail system is up and running. There's plenty of recreational activities for paddlers and smaller vessels, and as the system opens, our intent is to be fully transparent, to communicate well with our stakeholders. Our project list, the 20 or the 15 or so projects that we're working on now, is already on our website, and we plan to update that as we proceed. So if I could just take a minute or two and walk you across the state and tell you what our opening plan looks like. I'll walk you right through the 5 regions. The western region, that's the region that's opening today, and that spans from Tonawanda to Lockport. Okay, that region we anticipate to be fully open by July 4th. All the projects there are already done. The Finger Lakes region spans from Lockport to the Montezuma Wildlife Refuge, from Lock 34, 35 in Lockport to Lock E25 at Mays Point. The vast majority of that region will also be open by July 4th. There's one lock in particular, CS2 and 3. That's the lock that will prohibit the connection of Seneca Lake to the Erie Canal until the first week of August. Okay, that's a rehabilitation project that's underway. That's a contractor project, lots of electrical and some mechanical work. Central New York region will also largely be available by July 4th. The only thing, and the central region goes from the Montezuma Wildlife Refuge all the way east to Oneida Lake. It encompasses Oneida Lake. It also encompasses the Oswego Canal. Okay, so the entire central region is anticipated to be open by July 4th, except Lock 07 in Oswego. Okay, and that's the second lock in from Lake Ontario. So that lock we don't anticipate will be ready until August 10th. So the public can enjoy the Oswego Canal up to Lock 07, Oneida Lake, all the way out to Montezuma. They just can't get to Lake Ontario because of that significant project. This is the third, that was a $25 million lock rehabilitation project, and this is the completion of that work. So we had anticipated being complete by June, but the work stopped in mid-March, obviously. Moving east, the Mohawk Valley region, that covers from Sylvan Beach, the east end of Oneida Lake, all the way east to Cranesville, and that's known as Lock E10. This is the most challenging region in terms of being able to open. There are 3 significant projects in that region with various completion dates, but for that region, the Mohawk Valley region, and this is the region with all the movable dams, we are saying that we will be able to open the region between July 4th and August 10th. So there's multiple projects, there's all the movable dams, okay, and just, you know, the out of the 3 critical projects I mentioned, the one with the earliest completion date is an embankment repair project in the Utica area, and that isn't expected to be complete until July 20th. Now, lastly, the Capital District. The Capital District, you know, that's a region that isn't yet open, although it seems imminent. So if the Capital District were to be open today or tomorrow, that's similar to Central New York and the Finger Lakes in that the public will have access to the vast majority of the system. There's 2 projects there, though. One is on the very northerly end of the Champlain Canal up in Whitehall. That project will not be, well, that project we have about 9 or 10 weeks of work to go to be able to complete that project. So access to Lake Champlain will not be available until late July, early August. Okay, and then lastly, there is the lock rehabilitation project at Vischer Ferry, which is west of Waterford. That project is a mid-July anticipated completion date. So, you know, that short stretch of the Erie Canal from Vischer Ferry east and the entire Champlain Canal will be available for the public's use. And, you know, as I say available, I mean that the water will be at normal navigation levels and the locks will be operated normal hours. So you can see that we're, you know, the most of the system will be available by July 4th. The Mohawk Valley is challenging, and even in parts of the system that are open, there are, you know, one-off projects here and there that pose a restriction, you know, until some point later in the summer. Looking at the summer as a whole, you know, at some point, whether it's late July or early August, the concept of through navigation being, you know, totally 100% available from Lake Erie to the Hudson or from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, we will get there, but it will not be until late July, early August. So that's the plan. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of people, and safety is the #1 priority. And we, you know, we will keep our website updated in terms of our progress so the public can see that. So that's it, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it's a very challenging, excuse me, circumstance, and it's probably a no-win situation for you and the team overall. So I agree. The best thing we can do is over-communicate to the boating community so they're as current as possible. They're going to be over-anxious and ready to roll sooner than we're going to be ready for them. That said, kudos for an aggressive plan to make up for lost time to the extent possible and ensure that for at least most of the official summer, July, August, and into September, the boaters will be able to enjoy the beauty of the canals. So you'll forever be under the microscope from the boating community. So just continue to do everything you can to keep them informed and aware, and so they can anticipate and plan. Well done.
Dave,
anything else for
Dave? A couple of questions. I assume some of these projects that are in progress here, you know, they're past the point of no return. I would assume in some point is that it involves the loss of money or time, or you know, these repairs are need to get done so that the particular lock or whatever can be operational and so forth. So I'm assuming that's the case. Is that right?
Yeah, the scope of work that we're talking about, for example, take the Lock 07 project in Oswego. At this point, the walls of the lock chamber, the concrete is removed to a depth up to, I think, 2 feet. And all the new reinforcing steel is there, waiting for new concrete. So the formwork is up. It's just, that's a very compromised situation that would cause problems for if we were to say, let's just open it for boaters. It would be problematic. For some of the lock work that our internal staff are doing, they may have, for example, the miter gates, the doors to the lock may be off the lock and in various stages of rehabilitation, so on and so forth. So, the situations vary across the state, but generally, yes, we are basically opened up and compromised at many of these projects and locations.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Anything else? All right.
If I could just say one thing, Mr. Chairman, that we are also going to communicate to communities and stakeholders the available amenities, services, and activities in each of these sections as we open them up, because there are actually a lot of activities and services and amenities that you can do now within the different section of the canals, even while we're doing our work. We believe that during this crisis, especially when the weather gets nicer and nicer out there, that people are going to need to go outside while practicing social distancing, and the canals and the Empire State Trail along the canals are going to be valuable assets to accomplish that for the communities. And so you will hear from us several communication pieces just to tell and educate the communities and the users what's available, what can they do today while we're.
Yeah, that the glass is at least half full from that standpoint. There's no question, as you've said, that gap between Memorial Day weekend coming up and the 4th of July, while it seems short in the grand scheme of things, it'll seem long under these circumstances for those who want to enjoy the waterway. So making clear what access is available and what other resources they can take advantage of is a great idea. So great.
Thank you.
Okay. Gil, want to pick it back up, you and Adam, with finance?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Barsky, our CFO, will be presenting the 3+9, we call it 3+9 financial report of our income statement. 3 meaning 3 actual months, January to March. 9 is forecast months, the 9 remaining months of the year. At this point, I'd like to communicate to the board that this is really more of a historical reference point, and the reason I say that is because the COVID crisis really has changed fundamentally all of the assumptions in our operating environment. And so again, use it as a historical reference point. The net income that projection that Adam will be presenting is a mid, I would say, of a range of potential outcomes. And what's included in that range is another $1 billion or so potential downside in our wholesale electric supply business, or what we call, as you know, prices has been depressed, customer usage has been depressed as we have been on a New York pause operating environment. What's not included is in the forecast, net income forecast, is a potential impact from a regulatory ruling that we just received from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission right after our board meeting on March 31st. And that impact, as was disclosed in our offerings issue bonds in March, is also something that we are disputing with FERC. So it's not something that we just accept. But nevertheless, with the way the regulatory process works, we will show you the exact as FERC determines and PJM determines that actual potential impact. Need to finalize their tariff at the end of this month. After that point, we'll know the exact impact. But whatever those are, the impacts are, they will be reflected in the financial statement that we will reply of this year. So with that, let me ask Adam to present the 3+9 financial statement as a reference point. Adam.
Sure, Gil, thank you. As Gil said, we'll continue to evaluate that issue and reflect it in future updates once the number becomes, or any outcome of that becomes more clear for our purposes. As Gil mentioned, this is a 3+9. The 3 actual is a -8 million. And the 9 is a forecast through the rest of the year. We're in the process of, again, updating April and our forecast going forward into a 4+8. This forecast is really, we provide a number of -48 million. It's really a midpoint of a range. This, given the moving pieces that are going on this year, as being an unusual year, this number could easily move one way or another in a $25-30 million direction. The major drivers going from the 40 million of net income to -48, as also was mentioned, is the very low energy prices we've seen compared to what was originally projected when the financial plan was done. Of that, some 42 million of it is reflected from our merchant book in terms of the shortfall from what was originally anticipated in our budget, which was 335 million. And as of the time of this update, it was projected to be 292 million. The remainder has to do with customer impact based on the energy prices, for the remainder getting to 59 million. There's a lower loss of the transmission revenue, and the margins for non-utility revenue really relates to the customer energy efficiency program, and assumes that the pause has delayed the completion and starting of work that was in the pipeline. So that reflects a reduction from the revenues that were originally anticipated. On the operating expense side, the major parts of that, as we can see, is a $5 million or $5.5 million cost of the COVID expenses. That is net of potential FEMA reimbursement. So that's what we currently estimate we would not be able to recover from FEMA for that portion of the cost related to COVID. And the other major drivers on the expense side are the impacts of the pause on our capital program with respect to projections made for labor to capital allocation. So when people work on construction jobs, their time is charged to the capital project. That comes back as a sort of a reimbursement into the O&M, reducing the O&M expense. When those hours aren't charged the way they were anticipated to be, it results in an increase in the O&M as a result of that. And that assumes the earlier projections on the pause. To the extent that gets unpaused sooner than was anticipated, some of that number may further be reduced in terms of getting more allocation back from capital. But that really gets into the swing between the 40 million and the -48 million net income projection. Is there any questions on that?
I think we had a good dialogue last week at Finance Committee on this. As I attempted to state there's no question, as you guys have just recapped, Probably the unknowns are as notable as the knowns at this point, and time will tell how this plays out. But as with all businesses, the impacts on us are significant and substantial, but as is not the case with all businesses, we're very well positioned to withstand this. So while not at all minimizing the impacts, as I said last week in finance, and want to ensure any of our constituents appreciate that we're well positioned and even better positioned with the efforts of Adam and Gil and the team over the last 60 days to withstand whatever the ultimate ramifications of this year turn out to be. So, unless there's other questions from the board. Okay. Anything else, Gil, that you want to offer on that or to wrap things up?
Yeah, just as you said, Mr. Chairman, that this is going to be a rough year for NYPA. No question about it. But our medium to long-term prospects are sound because we have flexibility and liquidity. We have a great staff. We have a great set of assets and projects going forward. So there is a big bump this year that we're going to be facing, but as you said, we are well positioned to withstand it, and we are well positioned to build back better from it, and not only to bounce back, but to bounce forward.
Yeah, and the real proof in the pudding will be how we do bounce forward, to repeat that phrase, and what it means in terms of how we're able to recover and how quickly we're able to do that in the years that follow. So I have every confidence you and the team will be up for that challenge. Okay.
That said, go ahead. Next will be you reporting on behalf of Tracy.
As I just referenced, we had a Finance Committee meeting last week, and Tracy McKibben, as our chair, would typically report out, but in her absence, I'll provide a brief recap and ask for adoption, or put on the floor at least a handful of motions that we approved coming out of that committee for hopeful approval by all of us as a full board. Given that all of us were part of that Finance Committee, I'll take the less is more approach with these recaps. I said there was a handful. First one in utility ops, Joe Kessler's world, if you will, was a multi-year, 10-year contract in the amount of $80 million to GE Package Power relative to repairs, maintenance, and upgrades of the small clean power plant fleet. Significant award, multi-year award. Again, as with others, Joe and his team will come back to us as individual actions are taken. But as we discussed last week in committee, hopefully with the benefit of that dialogue, I can now get a motion to adopt the item as recommended by committee.
So moved.
So moved.
Thanks, Mike. Dennis, I'll take yours as a second. Unless there's any other or further questions, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, next up in the commercial ops world, an item in terms of expansion of the vendor pool for the e-mobility program. 14 additional contracts are being awarded to an array of vendors, as well as for an additional 20 firms in the vendor pool to increase the overall capacity for delivery and performance in concert with Sarah and her team, increasing that capacity from 60 million up to 150 million in the aggregate. Again, that was evaluated, discussed, and ultimately approved at the committee level, and hence I'd ask for a motion to adopt this item by us as a full board.
So moved.
Thanks,
Second.
Dennis. Have a second. Thanks, Judge. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Third, Justin and the lawyers need continuing support from external legal resources, what I'll call a re-up of a rolling 5-year series of contracts that we have with a variety of other legal firms that historically has run in the $15 to $20 million zone. This particular request is for just under $18 million for on-call legal services. Again, as discussed last week. Unless there's any other questions for Justin and his team, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the item as presented.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank Mike. Second, Dennis. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. And for Robin, his team, obviously IT and the support has been referenced numerous times here is critical, not only in this crisis, but pushing forward. So contract awards for, support in the aggregate amount of $28 million. These are third-party vendors and providers that would support what otherwise Rob and his team deliver internally. The aggregate amount of those awards would be $28 million over the next 3 years. There's an option for some add-on time after that, as we discussed last week as well. Again, unless there's questions, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the item as moved at Finance.
So
moved.
Thank you, Judge, and I heard a second from Dennis. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. And lastly is, as is requested typically on a quarterly basis, is the release of additional funding to support the ongoing operations of Canal. And as we just heard in earnest in connection with the reopening of the canal for an additional 23 million or just under 23 million. Again, part of our one of our quarterly allotments that we otherwise typically have been and continue to provide. So I'd ask for a motion to adopt that recommendation as well.
So moved.
Whoever hasn't gotten credit for a motion, Mike, going around the horn, and Judge, you get the second this time. So
fine.
I'll leave it to Karen to clean all that up. But all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. So as you can tell, in addition to an in-depth discussion of the financial results, more importantly, prospectively in the impact of this crisis on our business and how we step back into it. It was a very busy, engaged, and lengthy Finance Committee meeting. So again, I'll thank Tracy for chairing that session. Last item on our agenda today is the consent agenda. I'll hope and assume everyone's had an opportunity to review those materials as they prepped for today's discussion. As always, happy to take any questions relative to those matters brought forward. Otherwise, I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided to us.
So moved.
Thanks.
Second.
Have a second.
Second.
Thanks, Dennis. Assuming no questions, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. And with that, I'm pleased to bring this virtual board meeting to a close. As always, thank everyone for their time and attention. Kudos one more time to Gil and his team and the entire organization for just outstanding not only effort, but results and outcomes over these last couple months and the tremendous challenges that have been presented. Again, you've distinguished and differentiated the authority and the Canal Corporation. Proud of you and very appreciative, and know you will engage in all the more earnest as we ramp back up in the weeks and months ahead. So with that, I'm pleased to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Thanks very much. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And we look forward to seeing everyone, whether that be virtually or on the unlikely chance that it's in person. But either way, we'll reconvene at the end of July, July 28th. In the interim, stay healthy, stay safe, stay well, wear your mask, keep socially distant, but otherwise enjoy the warmth and sunshine that the spring and summer season holds for all of us. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Same to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.